and forge a new global partnership. So, just as a background, moving from the MDGs to the post-2015 development agenda, what are the uneasy reflections? One of the key issues that has been underlying the debates is what have we accomplished in the past decade in the MDGs framework? Where do we stand? How has it really helped us to reflect development as a set of goals, targets, and indicators that are articulated under these goals and targets? And given the fact that we haven't met most of the Millennium Development Goals currently, what seems to be missing? What are the missing linkages? As part of this, the UN Secretary General has also put together a system task force which has come out with a series of think pieces these are basically interagency think pieces of different agencies of the UN system, along with experts from outside the UN system as well, on various issues. You see think pieces on finance, investment, macroeconomic development, issues of science, technology, innovation, and post-2015 developmental partnership has also been reflected in the think piece in this context, which I had the pleasure of authoring. Moving ahead, now if you take stock of all that is going on and the discussions that are happening, you see a couple of things that are quite illuminating. The current report of the high-level panel, if you read through it, it's an extremely well-meant piece. It's really well articulated, but it still talks about sustainable development goals as a set of goals, indicators, and targets under that. And if you see the role of technology, it's mentioned in several places, but it's only articulated under one indicator, 12F currently, and that's on how to build and share science technology indicators database. So in the broader UN system and thinking on this, there is clearly a reflection that there is a need to integrate research and policy insights and different communities working on innovation policies and innovation systems better on this topic, share these within. So what you basically more interactive learning within the innovation community, and in order to demonstrate the synergies between technology, innovation, and sustainable and inclusive growth. In this context, what I'm going to list out now is basically an articulation of the role of innovation as a set of issues from what we see on what is happening at the macro level and how do you link it to the insights that we have on innovation and technological learning at the micro level. The first issue is really how can we ensure that the discourse on innovation capacity is more closely linked to the key developmental challenges that we face today, namely poverty, widening inequality, and widespread unemployment in both poor and rich countries. And I think this follows very neatly from the Freeman lecture that Luke presented 2 days ago, where he talked about the need to look back and to integrate innovation capacity more broadly with issues of employment and widening inequality, which were looked down upon 20 years ago. But now it is clear that technology doesn't function in a silo, it doesn't function isolatedly. Macroeconomic influences have a big role to play on how countries move on to build productivity growth and enforce structural change. So one of the key issues is that there's been insufficient attention to the cross-cutting role of innovation capacity in the current MDGs. So articulating a set of new sustainable development goals or a sustainable development agenda has to identify a series of these cross-cutting themes, technology and innovation capacity being one of them. And if you see the current MDGs, technology, where does it figure? It figures mainly in access to essential medicines, particularly in the context of HIV/AIDS and neglected diseases. And it figures in the context of internet connectivity and information and communication technologies. And the favored approach has been to do this through needs assessment and targeted capacity building. And this needs to change in the new agenda post-2015. Basically, building up on what we know, technology has 3 dimensions or innovation capacity. It has clearly the public goods dimension, which we discussed for health, agriculture, climate change. It has a clear private enterprise development dimension, which has occupied us here in the Globelics innovation community as well, which is about technological change, interactive learning, and the role of ICTs, and it has a critical developmental dimension. Technology is critical to the process of productivity growth and structural change. And issues remain to be tackled. What we see now is that we see emerging economies, but we see a widening gap between developing countries themselves. We see a changing demography of influence, affluence, and poverty. Not only are India and China hosting large number of the R&D and the GDP, they're hosting 47% of global poverty right now. And we see the new rich and the new poor, and they are not split between countries, they're split even within countries. And the technological divide is a new developmental divide, and it's not going to be solved by simply giving new technologies or making technologies more accessible. And this, you see it nowhere more clearly than in the ICTs debate. Because if you give ICTs infrastructure, it doesn't automatically mean productivity growth through ICTs. Then the second issue is, in the global context, we see that technology is intricately linked to other spheres of development. How do we move on to explore these linkages better? It's linked to trade opportunities intricately, markets, niches, export opportunities decide what countries can do, regardless of what the national innovation system dictates and provides for as a framework. And the role of resource-led booms in emerging economies leads to more entrenchment of low-income, technologically marginalized countries into natural resource enclaves. There's a large movement of labor away from industrial activities into agriculture and natural resources. And how do we arrest that? And our work, therefore, on innovation systems and countries is set in a broader context of this movement of labor away from productive activities to natural resource sectors, the constant struggle between winning sectors and losing sectors, and who determines this, and the impact of other new developments at the global level. For instance, the new debate on climate change, low carbon development, the green economy. And how can innovation policies be more inclusive to deal with these linkages better? A third set of issues are, what are the possible obstacles that may hinder knowledge flows to developing countries, and how and what new institutions and policies are required to stem the growth of this technological divide. Of course, to reduce the STI gap, there is a need to enhance the capacity to absorb knowledge. And there is a need to reduce barriers that have to do with international knowledge protection. But how do we better enforce the ability of learning networks to facilitate this? And secondly, the capacity to absorb knowledge reflects in a large variety of institutional factors, as well as capacity building in the form of education, vocational training, and so on. And we need to strengthen these further, not just within the context of looking inwards into national innovation systems, but linking national innovation systems in a far more intricate way with trade, employment, macroeconomic factors, and how countries can promote structural change of the kind that they want to have and they want to see in their economies. The last issue sub-issue in issue 3 is, what are the possible obstacles that hinder knowledge flows to developing countries in this new context, and how and what new institutions and policies are required to stem this divide. The current divide in international knowledge protection is mainly articulated in the form of intellectual property rights, but that's not necessarily the case. You see a huge brain drain. You need people going back to their countries and contributing to building innovation systems in their countries. That is the best way to share tacit know-how. We know that from the experience of East Asian countries. How do we make that a reality in the case of Africa, for instance? And with that, I would like to invite our panelists. Bengt-Ake first, please.
Thank you very much. What I'm going to do is basically to reflect on how Globelics can contribute to the post-2015 agenda. And I think the critical factors for having some kind of success is of course that we get some policy action. And I know that many of my colleagues, including those who are going to speak immediately after me and myself, are very closely acting together with the policy community. giving advice on innovation strategies to governments, even presidents, etc. So this is one way, Globelics, actually, that we have a lot of people in our midst who are directly contributing, giving input to the policy process. I'm not going to speak so much about that. I'm going to talk more about how we can contribute with new knowledge. And I'm going to reflect on the question that Padmashree put. By the way, I would like to thank very much Padmashree for organizing this session. I think it's very timely, and you might have seen that there are only two pure plenaries, and I think it's so important. So we discussed that everybody should be here to take part in this discussion, and I really think Globelics has some important things to offer. But rather than giving a rather general response to the question, where the question is how we can explore the linkages between innovation technology and other spheres of development, I wanted to refer to some specific potential projects. By chance, the Globelics Secretariat is involved in preparing 3 applications, and some of the collaborators in Africa are here. Dutrenit is one of them, and Rebecca and Anna are also here. And I would like to just give a very short presentation of these potential projects to illustrate what kind of contribution I think Globelics can make. One project will be to look at the role of South-South transfer of technology. We're going to try to understand if BRIC technologies emanating from China or India, etc., are more appropriate when it comes to promote inclusiveness and sustainability than technologies from the north. We are not going to start by saying that this is the case, but we are going to try to find out if this is the case. And the idea would be to link trade and knowledge flows between China and Kenya to the needs and perspectives of end users of solar and wind technologies. And we would then see if we can find some social imprinting of these technologies, which implies that technologies developed for people who have low income, who are not very included, etc., are developed and are more appropriate than to use in the context of Kenya. But we're also going to ask what kind of knowledge infrastructure is necessary for transforming these potentially appropriate technologies into inclusive and sustainable outcomes. And one question I think we have to ask ourselves from time to time is when we talk about inclusive development, is there a trade-off? I mean, can we just say we go for inclusiveness, or do we not also have to take into account the efficiency of the different solutions? And also to make a distinction here between a long-term and a short-term trade-off. If we take into account positive impact, dynamic effects of inclusion, is there still a trade-off? The other project would focus on Tanzania, and it would be a focus on organizational work and see how that can promote inclusion and development. we would not just focus on employment, and it definitely would mean going further than STI, science, technology area, taking into account the world of work. And the idea would be to map how people work and learn and innovate in Tanzania. We would gather data at the household level, capturing all kinds of work, formal, informal, mixed and combined. We would look at the absorption of knowledge and of existing technologies, which have a greater impact upon both inclusion and development than new techniques. And we will look at how this is determined or affected by how people work and learn. I would say a general point is that in economics there is a strong bias to look at numbers and volume of employment and complete disregard of what I call the quality of work, how you work and how people learn at the workplace. And I would say offering access to learning at the workplace is a key to exclusion. And then the third one would be focusing on opening up new spaces for interactive learning between knowledge institutions and knowledge users. And here we would look at three. Vitrina will be coordinating this project if it takes off. It would take Tanzania, Kenya and Uganda. And an attempt would be to give a new understanding to this concept of knowledge transfer and to inspire new types of pro-poor and pro-sustainability policies. The traditional view, when you have what you call a transfer problem, which is slightly misleading because what we are talking about is active learning processes. The traditional view is that the problem is normally at the supply side, and policies are aimed mainly at stimulating knowledge institutions to engage more in pushing knowledge towards users. This project would study how knowledge producers and users in different innovation systems interact and learn from each other. New perspectives will give strong emphasis upon the competence of users, of knowledge and of intermediators. The project would end up with using the insights reached as input to training of what we call entrepreneurs. These are activists who actually build these new spaces for interactive learning. So, to sum up, the question was, in the global context, technology is intricately linked to other spheres of development, and how can we explore these linkages better? And my answer is, we can do so by research projects that go beyond reproduction of old ideas. I would say that the ideal Globelics research project should be creative, and it means that it should combine a critical view of theory and practice with a production of new and constructive ideas for what to do. I think it means that we follow in the tracks opened by Chris Freeman. I would say we act as what I would call critical optimists when we pursue our research. Thank you.
Thank you, Bengt-Ake. I would like to invite Gabriela Dutrenit now to share her views.
Okay, thank you for inviting me to think about these issues. And I like the presentation by Bengt-Ake because he tries to focus on the idea of these three new project proposal. He tries to look at the South from at the micro level. because much of this discussion about the Millennium Development Goals and the post-Millennium Development Goals come from international organizations, and the projects are trying to put the attention at the micro level on the country from the south. And then, in my case, in my thought, I was trying to think from the south and try to think how to implement all these new ideas about how to move, try to move in the direction to reach after 2015 the Millennium Development Goals, because at the end of the day, as Padmashree showed, we haven't reached that goals. Okay, so I would like to talk about the implication from the policy making process at the country by in our countries. What are the problems when we try to think in this millennium or post-millennium development goal? And one point that I would like to put here is that policies operate as parallel channels. When we talk about this type of goals that are oriented to the national demands or the national problems in our countries, which are problem at the world level, the problem of the South, but when we try to think in our countries, we have on one side policies of health, policies of food policies, and we have also the policy, the science, technology, and innovation policy. But what we don't have usually is a connection and articulation between the different type of policy. So we have difficulties to connect the prescription of international organisms concerning key development challenge. We have difficulty to connect this with the policy-making process. This type of long-term national objectives that are connected with these development goals at the international level, they require an international approach. And our policy-making has a very much sectoral approach. We have followed an international discussion on the transversality of the science, technology, and innovation policy. But when we look at the country level, how the science, technology, and innovation policy operate, we observe that there is difficulty for this type of transversality of the science, technology, and innovation policy. So our domestic science, technology, and innovation policy are much oriented to building capabilities or building science, technology, and innovation capabilities than to solving social needs. And when we are talking about developmental objectives, we are talking about the social needs in our countries. But our policies in science, technology, and innovation are much more oriented to how to increase our capabilities, not only in innovation. I prefer to use science, technology, and innovation because we have problems on the sides also. We don't have enough strong scientific capabilities. I don't like to talk only about innovation. So our policies operate, I say, as parallel channels and not as a network of policies to solve problems that are intersectorial problems. So our national problems that are related with the developmental goals at the international level require then an intersectoral approach. If the targets are national problems or social needs, it is necessary to articulate long-term strategies, we can call them priorities, strategic knowledge fields in our countries related to this type of long-term target. This type of long-term target require a specific science and technology infrastructure, again, not only innovation capabilities. They require to include relevant productive sectors in our country, but they also require human resources. And some of these issues were mentioned by Bengt-Ake some minutes ago. So our focus on national problems in our countries require to change the way we are viewed in favor of more investment in science, technology, and innovation in our countries to solve this problem, this national problem that we have. But a reality in our countries, and not only in the South, this is all over the world. We are under the power of the Treasury. And the Treasury has a different language. You cannot talk about we need more capability because science, technology, and innovation may contribute to solve any problem in the country. We need to talk in terms of how to create value. Value, economic value or social value. We can solve a problem, but we have to show with indicators how the investment in science, technology, and innovation can contribute to solve a specific problem and the point of the creation of value. So we need to be very clear in terms of the economic and social impact of the investment in science, technology, and innovation, and very clear which are the goals. So just an example, because now in the case of Mexico, we are in the process of designing the science, technology, and innovation program for the next 20 or 25 years, because this program now has a long-term view. And then we are trying to focus the design of the project actually in the national problems. Which are our national problems in the case of Mexico? They are very similar to the Millennium Development Goals. We need a problem of health in Mexico. We have problem of food, how to feed the whole population. We have problem of poverty and hunger, etc. We have problem of environment and how to reach sustainability, etc. So one of the national problems that we are focused specifically in terms of health is the problem of the diabetes. Yes. And this is an important health illness in the case of Mexico. So when you look at this national problem, or when you try to focus the science, technology, and innovation program in terms of this type of problem, you need to think, well, this is not just a problem of science, technology, and innovation policy. This is a problem of the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Agriculture, the Ministry of Education, Social Policy, Economy, because we are talking about a problem that is an intersectorial problem, like the diabetes. We need a lot of knowledge field to solve these problems that are related, and we need to focus the generation of knowledge in the country, or using knowledge that is generated at international level, but many knowledge fields, nutrition, genomics, biotechnology, sociology, social psychology, to solve problems and education. We need to educate the population how to change the type of food that the population eat, etc. There are many industrial activities related to that: agriculture, food, aquaculture, pharmaceutical, telecommunications,